how do you feel sports, the media landscape has been changing in these few years? Because at the time when you were at Copa 90, you were at the early days, let's say, of all this digital revolution. And I think Copa 90 were probably one of the first digital publishers. And that has grown a lot, and you have the likes of 423 and others. How do you see the ecosystem now?
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating, right? I think you touched on the fact that that media landscape has evolved over time. Also, technology and the way that we consume media as fans has evolved. So naturally, organizations have had to adapt accordingly to be able to connect with fans in new ways. So, I mean, I think when you look at, even looking back at our time at Meta, the evolution of how fans were consuming content and how that shaped also new technologies and new features and functionalities across Meta. If we rewind back to 5-6 years ago, is very much around long form content and 3 minutes plus videos, and we're now in an environment where it's all about short form content and consumption and being able to engage with fans in a new way. Obviously, that's not to say that the other one, it's redundant, but it's around being able to adapt accordingly to be able to engage with fans in a way that reflects how people are consuming content nowadays. I would say even the introduction as well of new technologies and what we see across the board. Again, just touching on our time at Meta, I think when you look at how things evolved over time, the introduction of Reels, which I've already touched on from a short form content point of view, but the boom of the metaverse, right? And being able to publishers and organizations being able to identify ways to connect with fans through the metaverse. And then you look at Threads, and obviously we all know why that's also came around. And even obviously now the hot topic right now, it's leveraging the use of AI and how organizations, whether you're a club, whether you're a league, whether you're a content producer, how you leverage some of those technologies to either be more efficient, but equally being able to connect and engage with fans. So I think it's really interesting in that sense. Obviously, I think Mans there was probably quite like technology focused. I think at a wider, more macro level, we see how the shift to and the importance of athletes, which I know we've talked about in the past, and the role that they play in the ecosystem. I think over time that's become increasingly more important. And also even again, from a fan point of view, that's the type of content that we want to watch and consume, and we want to get to know the stories and the ins and out of our favorite athletes. And I think when you look at the way how leagues and organizations are shifting towards that focus and really realizing the importance of elevating the athletes and these figures who have huge followings, who are super engaged and loyal, that's really important. So I think, yeah, obviously, over time, it's fascinating to see how things have evolved, both from a consumption point of view, a technology point of view. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see where things are at, even, if we were to have these conversations in a few years' time.
Yeah, because if you think about the old model, rights holders and sport properties in general, they only had one conversation. Yeah. And that conversation was with basically broadcasters. They sign the deal, you get the distribution, you get the money, happy days. Yeah. That's it. You were transferring as a right holder, you were transferring somehow the relationship with your fan to a third party.
Yeah.
But with the disruption of social media in general and all these platforms, this transfer is not anymore the model. We need to create a lot of new ways of consuming content. And sometimes you see and you hear people saying, no, because young generations are not following sport anymore, they lost interest. But I always make the same exercise. And I tell you, if I think when I was a kid, and I put together the watch hours, the concept that is very common for us, but not for many people, of watch hours. So the time you pass consuming sports content. When I was a kid, it was maybe one live game per weekend, so 90 minutes. I'm a big football fan, so 90 minutes of football on the weekends. Maybe you have like the news, 5 to 10 minutes of sports content that you were consuming every day.
Yeah.
And then you have on Mondays in Spain, there was a very good show that I used to follow called El Día Después, which is the day after, they were doing a summary of everything that happened during the weekend. So we're talking about, I don't know, 3 hours of sports content consumption in total. If I think about that today I'm consuming the content that I see from the athletes, the content that I see from the teams, the content that I see from the leagues, live games. I'm probably looking at 3 hours per day of sport content. And as new technology are developing, new ways of consumption are coming up, and it's going to be very interesting to see where the technology is gonna take us. You touch on AI. AI obviously plays a big role on what you're doing today at Greenfly. But in this ecosystem where you see a lot of new things and new ideas and new technologies coming up, what do you think is the biggest challenge that the industry has today?
From a technology point of view, or just
from
in
technology in general, from a technology or business, I think how you match all this new consumption and all this fast evolving technology ecosystem to a business model that is very stuck in their own model still.
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of angles there. I think, first of all, in terms of, again, the challenges specifically for organizations, I think it's understanding your audience really well and being able to differentiate from others. I think we've talked about the fact, you've mentioned it, there's so much content being created out there. There's so many different platforms where you and I can watch content, whether it's highlights, short clips, whatever that is. And I'm not just talking on social, but also we've got, even entertainment, like from a streaming point of view, there's just so much out there. And I think that's where one of the challenges lies, is as an organization, what can I do and what do I need to do to be able to capture the attention of my fans? So you need to understand your fans really well, right? How can I speak to them in an authentic voice? So that's number one. And, that's not an easy task, right? No. Again, there's, kudos. There's a lot of organizations who do this really well, who create really cool, excellent, organic, authentic content that fans want to consume. And I think those will be the ones that win. Obviously, it's easier said than done. And I think from a technology point of view, or in terms of another challenge, is that being able to identify tools and resources that enable you to do and operate much more effectively and efficiently in a world where there's so much to do. Obviously, we've briefly talked around Greenfly, but it's even leveraging technologies like that to be able to make some of that process and workflows much easier for the business. So whether it's being able to capture real-time content and be able to distribute that at scale in an efficient manner, I think that's probably another challenge for organizations, is in a world where there is so much to do, how do you identify those solutions and workflows that will help you be more efficient? And by being more efficient, you can be more effective, right? Because it means that, okay, you can spend more time working through the strategy and making sure that you nail that. So I'd say, those are probably some of the challenges that come to mind. Obviously, that's not to say that the only ones, but yeah.
No, I think we're in a moment in a pivotal moment in this industry where the model is changing and everyone is trying to adapt. So I think that the biggest challenge the industry has in general is how you're going to adapt to all these changes that are happening all the time. And as new technology comes in, new challenges arise. But at the same time, we have big opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think the opportunities come from new business model that you can develop. So outside of the media rights, which has been traditionally the main monetization source for big rights holder and sport organization, where do you think sports properties need to invest today to monetize their content more effectively in this new ecosystem?
You're asking the hard questions today, huh? Where do organizations need to invest today to ensure that they monetize content effectively? I think it varies. I think and again, not to repeat myself, but I'll go back from a tooling and infrastructure point of view, is being able to invest in those resources that allow you to effectively set up an operation, which then you can monetize in different ways. So again, if it is from a content management point of view, it's being able to have the technology and the resources in place that enables you to package that content up effectively and being able to sell that to your sponsors, for example. But equally, not only to your sponsors, but we're talking about rights-holding broadcasters as well, and being able to drive incremental value for your rights-holding broadcasters because you have a new offering in place that is complementary to the 90 minutes that adds another angle and another lens when you're having, as a league, for example, when you're having conversations around media rights, etc. So I think that's probably one of the things. And then I would also go back to the athlete and the public figure. Obviously, there's some things around how these organizations monetize their talent. There's complexities around that as well, right, from a player contracting point of view, image rights, etc. But I think that's another angle as well. I think more and more you're seeing brands put their athletes front and center to what they do. Because, again, going back to what we talked around the role of athletes and the role that they play to helping elevate brands, leagues, whatever that is. So I think that's another challenge as well, of being able to effectively navigate that.